Hello, hello, hello. Today we'll be focusing on marker-based rigid body tracking and markerless human tracking. For rigid body tracking, we'll be using Vicon's Nexus software. In Nexus, rigid body can be represented in the form of segments. In Nexus, we create subjects. Subject can be formed of one or many segments. Deformable object will have many segments, while rigid body object will have a single segment. Now let's create rigid body subject in Nexus. On the right hand side, you're going to see Subject Properties tab. On the left hand side, you will see the Subject tab. This is where we will create a new subject. We're going to call it Clapper Top. Now that we've created the clapper, let's zoom in to look at the clapper. There are 4 markers on the top of the clapper. That's what we're trying to annotate. Now let's look in the 3D view. You see the top 4 markers? That's what we're trying to annotate. To do this, we're going to go into the right hand side and select the subject, and then we will start a recording by pressing this button.
Capture started.
And we will stop.
Capture ended.
The recorded file you'll be able to see in the data management tab at the bottom. We will reconstruct this marker by pressing this button.
Ended.
Now we have reconstructed the marker that you can see in the 3D perspective view. Now that we've created the markers, let's create the segment by going back to the Subject Properties tab and name the segment Clapper Top. Let's create the segment. Let's select the markers, 4 different marker points that belongs to the Clapper Top. Once we do that, let's create the segment. Once the segment is created, let's go ahead and save the subject. Let's expand the subject. We will be able to see the marker. Let's change the default color to magenta color. Let's also change the segment to the same magenta color. You can see that the segment color is also now magenta. You can also see that each individual marker is of the same color. We can go ahead and change each one to a different color as well. Let's go ahead and do that. Once we change the color, that will reflect in your 3D perspective view that you will be able to see. Now let's go ahead and save the changes we've just made. We can also save them into its template so we can apply it in the future to a different model as well. Let's call it Clapper Top. Actually, you know what? There's already a Clapper Top, so let's call it IMDM Clapper Top. Now that will be our template, which reflects here in a bracket. Let's go ahead and create Clapper Bottom as well. Now let's create the Clapper Bottom segment. For that, let's select the segment first, and then let's name this segment Clapper Bottom. We're going to click Create and go ahead and select the 4 markers. It's important to select opposite markers so they have maximum distance from them. Let's color it a different color as well so it's distinct from the Clapper Top. Now let's go ahead and save the subject and also save its template all at the same time. Let's call it IMDM Clapper Bottom. We're working on the recorded file right now. So let's go ahead and look at live on the subjects and the segments that we've created. Let's go live now. Now what you're seeing is the segments and the subjects being tracked live, both in the camera view as well as the 3D perspective view. Now let's go ahead and watch it being tracked live as I go ahead and move this object in free space. As you can see, it is being tracked live as I move the clapper both in camera view and 3D perspective view. Let's go to the movie recording tab here, and we will use the capture button in this movie recording tab to start recording.
Capture started.
Now it has started recording. Now I'll go into the scene and I'll start moving different items. Here I'm going to use the clapper to mark a starting point that might be used to synchronize with other cameras, for example. I'm going to put this down and I will pick up the wand and I will pretend that this is a lightsaber or a sword that I can move around, that can be tracked, that can be now used later in your movie. Now that I'm done recording, I'm going to put this wand down and go ahead and stop the recording.
Capture ended.
Now you'll be able to see in the data management tab that there's a new trial 001 that we just created. Now let's reconstruct the markers.
Pipeline ended.
Now that we've reconstructed the marker, let's go ahead and do automatic labeling.
Pipeline ended.
They've been automatically labeled and now we know which marker belongs to which particular subject and segment. In the timeline view, we can drag around to navigate over time to see the motion of the subjects we just tracked. Now you might have noticed that on the right hand side, the camera view is not available. For this, we will need to first process the recorded data. Let's transfer the raw video into compressed video. Now that this is done, let's select the raw video and delete them. Now you'll see in trial 1 there's an M symbol that indicates that the movie is available for this one. Let's load the trial, and now when we click on the video camera, we'll be able to see the video footage as well of the recording. Now that we've done marker-based object tracking, let's move over to Lecture3 for markerless human tracking. Now let's create subject in Lecture3. In Lecture3, we will go to the track tab by pressing on the track. Here we will go ahead and first create a new subject. Here I have selected skeleton with fingers because I'm interested in tracking both hands and fingers. Now let's go ahead and create a subject that we're interested in tracking. Here subject means a human subject. Let's use the automatic tracking feature. So I will press on this search new button and it will start looking for a new person in the scene. Now once I enter this green circle, it will start tracking me. And as it tracks me, I will do something called electric dance that I like to call. And at this point, you see that it is starting to scale my body, making measurements of my body. Once the scaling is done 100%, the model creation is completed. At this time, I will rename the unknown subject into a specific name that I want to identify with. And I will save this into a file. We can also create a subject in a different way. So let's call this Snehish Auto. For the second method, I'm going to go ahead and record, and we'll create the model from the recorded file. I'm going to walk into the scene, and I'll do the same electric dance where every single joint is being moved, including my hands, fingers, vertebrae, knees, toes, wrist, elbows, shoulders. Once I feel I have done efficient amount of data recording such that every single joint has moved, I'll go ahead and stop the video recording, and I will use this recording to create a new subject model. Then I will go in the bottom left, you'll see shot 01, that's the recording. I will load this, and from the right hand side tracking panel, I will drag the drag new skeleton option and drag that skeleton and place it on top of my body. At this time, it will do the same thing. As you can see, it's starting to scale, and it's using all my motion to be able to make measurements of the length of each of my appendages. Once the scaling is done, I no longer need to continue tracking. So I'll go ahead and stop this and rename it and follow the same steps like earlier. And this time I will just rename it Snehish. Let's go ahead and record our trial. Let's hit this record button. Now that our recording is done, let's go ahead and stop the recording. Now let's load the recorded shot. And for this shot, let's go ahead and load the skeleton we had saved earlier. And we're going to drag the skeleton and place it on top of the actor. And this time the software will automatically start tracking. Now you notice we started tracking from the middle of the timeline. So this time we're going to track backwards so that we can get to other parts of the video where we would also like to be tracking. Now that we've completed tracking, let's go ahead and close the program so we can look at how the data is stored in the folders. Now you will notice that there are 8 cameras. We can open individual camera and look at the video. Here's another camera perspective. This is camera 5, that's facing forward. And this is what the video recorded. Now let's look at the different exported file type. Here is your 3D projected CSV files. Then we have your projected CSV files. And then we have our actor name.csv file, actor alternate.csv file. The actor CSV file has your 6D coordinates, x in millimeters, y, z, and then similarly rotations in x, y, z. Those are your angles of each of the bones. The positions are the position of the joint, and the rotations are the corresponding bone that is connected to the joint. The alt file has angles, but this time it's based on the bone degrees of freedom. Next we have 3D projected. These are values, the position values from the perspective of each camera. So right now I'm opening 3D projected 0, 0. This is your first camera, camera 1. It starts at index 0, goes to index 7. Now your dot projected, these are your 2D values. These are your values from respect to the camera on the image coordinate. Whatever the picture is, this is your 2D pose. On the left hand side, you see timestamp. These are your millisecond timestamps. Since this is 60 frames per second, each row is going to be 1/60th of a frame, which is approximately 16.67 milliseconds. Another exported format is the FBX format. For this format, we will be using Blender to view it. In Blender, let's use the File, Import, and then FBX format. Now let's select the trial that we just recorded earlier. Then make sure on the right hand side under Armature, you select the Ignore Leaf Bone and Automatic Bone Orientation. And now hit Import FBX. The motion capture recorded model and the pose data is now loaded into the file, and now you will be able to see the data that has been recorded, and you can navigate this on the timeline. By default, Blender cuts it off at 250 frames, so we're going to expand it to 12,000 because we have a pretty long data recording, and now we can click through and we can navigate in this timeline. And now we're able to see our data. We can also hide the mesh model and look at only the pose model here.